Just a couple of days ago, Bethesda Game Studios unveiled to the world Starfield's gameplay, and in years past this would be met to extreme excitement, but Bethesda's kind of in a precarious position right now. After Fallout 76, a lot of trust has been lost, and with Starfield it was sort of a divisive reaction. We discussed that in the last video of why so many people are very concerned about Starfield. It is a very ambitious game. 100 systems, 1,000 planets to some is exciting, to others it's a cause for concern. And the thing is with Starfield is that Bethesda clearly has been listening to the criticism that they've received. It's already been announced by Bethesda that there will not be a voiced protagonist. And then within the gameplay that was revealed the other day, we got to look at a lot of heavy RPG mechanics. Primarily and most exciting to myself is just the character creation options that we now have. Bethesda is going back to their roots. I just love the fact that we're going to be getting backgrounds once again for our characters and also traits. But, and I mean but, while Bethesda has been listening to criticism, they haven't listened to all of it. And what do I mean by that? Well, the creation engine. Within this recent gameplay reveal for Starfield, one of the primary issues that a lot of people brought up was the creation engine. As you could easily tell that a lot of the mechanics in Starfield look dated, and that is a problem. But today we have Todd Howard doing an interview with IGN in which he goes over all things Starfield, but he also discusses the company's future. Howard quite clearly within this interview understands the very mixed reception that Bethesda is receiving. While many fans have sky-high expectations, there are others like myself which are a little bit more skeptical, especially following Fallout 76 and some of the other stuff that Bethesda has done over the years. Nevertheless, there is one huge question on everyone's mind right now in regards to Starfield, and that is, how will procedural generation be used? Because we all know that not all 1,000 planets is going to be completely handcrafted. That's just impossible. But hey, these are sky-high ambitions that Bethesda set up for themselves, and Howard discusses that within this interview.
We're pretty aware you throw that out near the end, people will go, what did you just say? And then they'll have a lot of questions on how that works. And we do a lot of procedural generation, but I would keep in mind that we've always done that.
Right.
And it's a big part of Skyrim in terms of questing and some other things we do. We generate landscape using procedural systems, and so we've always kind of worked on it. And a planet by itself, if you think about it, is sort of, in a game concept, just one planet is infinitely big if you're going to do it in some realistic fashion. So once you're dealing with scale like that in procedural systems, the difference between, say, one planet that has some variation on it and 100 planets or 1,000, but it's actually not that big of a leap, if that makes sense, once you have good systems working for that.
So Howard puts a great emphasis on wanting that sense of discovery, and I respect that. And I also understand that Bethesda has done a lot of, let's just say, procedural generation in the past, but not on this scale. We've seen that in Fallout 4 with the Radiant quest lines, and it's just not very good. And I think this is going to be a concern no matter what between now and whenever Starfield releases, procedural generation and how it is used. It's not just that Bethesda has had a problem with this, it's that other developers who have taken on this have also had issues. No Man's Sky is probably the greatest example, but at least in that first year, it was a lot of barren and empty planets that didn't have much content with it. It was a lot of repetitive gameplay in which you're just collecting resources, you're making upgrades to your ship, and then you're discovering some artifacts and then going to an outpost or two and then doing the same thing on the next planet, and so on and so forth. The argument that some have made is that this is kind of like a dessert added on to the main meal, because it does seem like the main story, the main portion of this game is only going to be taking place on a couple of planets, and then we can venture onto these other 1,000 planets and explore a little bit, be a space adventurer, and that's something that Bethesda wanted to hit on. And I understand that. It's just that if it's just there to be there, then it's kind of useless, because a lot of people want their time to be used properly. They want there to be content there, a reason to explore. And if you're following that same path line that No Man's Sky has, in which you're just getting upgrades for your ship, you're just collecting resources, and maybe there's one discovery or one artifact to find, it's just not that interesting. And I think a lot of people would prefer if Bethesda just cut it down to maybe 10 or 20 planets, and then you have these vast vast planets to explore. Certainly this is something that's a great buzzword. It's something that a lot of people are bringing up and talking about it. We've seen that in Bethesda's past with Fallout 76, 16 times the detail. It's just, I think a lot of people want more than buzzwords. They want this to actually be something that is substantial, and I hope it is. Todd Howard does mention that there will eventually be a deep dive into how they're going about procedural generation and all of these planets later on, and that is definitely something I'm looking forward to. He does later in this interview bring up one example of a planet, and he says what is interesting about an ice ball. There isn't anything, but he wants to give players an opportunity to go to that planet, maybe build an outpost, and adventure around. And the only issue I have with that, and this is something a lot of people are bringing up, it's just how many ice ball planets are there going to be? Because we know that some are going to be full of life, some are not. And that's kind of the same issue that Hello Games with No Man's Sky ran into, in which there are a lot of ice ball planets, or planets that just don't look that interesting and really just feel like a waste of time. I think the point that I'm trying to hit on is the fact that there needs to be a reward for these planets. It needs to be something more than just running into an outpost or maybe finding an artifact. Because other developers, this is what they have struggled with, and this is going to be a big question to Starfield's success with its vast scope. Can you make it that there is not a repetitive cycle with how these planets work and with what players are encountering on each of these planets? Next though, and probably what is the most important part of a Bethesda experience, it is the handcrafted content. Howard discusses and gives an idea on how much of that we will see in Starfield.
We have done more handcrafting in this game, like content-wise, than any game we've done. We're over 200,000 lines of dialogue, so we still do a lot of handcrafting. And if people just want to do like what they're used to in our games and follow a main quest and do the quest lines, you're gonna see what you'd kind of expect from us.
And look, this is what I want to hear from Bethesda. The handcrafted content is the bread and butter of a Bethesda gameplay experience. 200,000 lines of dialogue, that is encouraging to hear. It just means that I'm probably going to be spending a lot of time within Starfield playing around, and I understand that Todd Howard emphasizes this handcrafted content as something that complements the procedural generation stuff, and again, this is something that only time will tell. And the next question that's brought up is something that has been concerning based on leaks, and that is space combat and how deep of a system this actually is.
We want this to feel something unique. So there is some dogfighting. I have quotes up. We keep the pace fairly slow. One of the games that I love that we sort of look at for pace is Mech Warrior, believe it or not.
Nice. Good call back there.
Like that's probably a little bit slower, but in terms of systems and power and being able to line things up. Now it's a little bit faster than that, but you know what I mean, as opposed to a twitchy dogfighter. So you can disable them, you can dock, you can board it. There's actually some quests that involve that. You can steal the ship. There's dialogue in space. There's star stations you can visit. There's smuggling. There's all the things that we would want.
Ultimately, this is one of those gameplay features that really you can't form an opinion on until you actually try it. All I'll say is that there are a ton of games that have space gameplay, and some of them work, some of them don't. It does appear that the early comparison that everybody is making is to No Man's Sky. Now, how that feels and whatnot, we only have one leak to go off from a random Bethesda developer who said it did not feel very good, but the game still doesn't come out until maybe sometime next year, so we'll have to wait and see how that all comes together. But right now, I mean, it has all the components that you would expect from space gameplay. Like Todd says, you can dock at a space station, it seems like you can take on pirates, some dogfighting, and so on and so forth. All the things that you would expect in a game that has space combat. Continuing on, this kind of goes back to handcrafted content, but it's a little bit more clarity and insight into how big Starfield is and how much content there is for players to explore and take on.
Yeah, we have, 4 main cities in the game, and New Atlantis is easily the biggest city in the game and the biggest city we've ever built. And it's more quests, so it might be 20% more than our previous ones. So if you say, and your mileage may vary, people generally don't straight line it, but if our previous ones, if we aimed for, let's say, a 25-hour main quest, this one might be in the 30s, maybe 40 just for the main quest. But
yeah.
So there really isn't too much I can say about this, just the fact that 40-hour main storyline, that's something I love to hear in these RPGs. That was actually one thing I was extremely disappointed with Cyberpunk 2077, as that main questline was very, very short. But 40-hour main storyline that doesn't include all the factions and side quests, that is music to my ears. This is what I love about Bethesda gameplay experiences. But to add on to that, we also have 4 main cities. That is not a huge shocker, as I always assume there's probably maybe 5 to 10 planets that have a substantial amount of content, and then there's about 1,000 more to, I guess, go explore and maybe build an outpost. Last but not least, Howard does bring up the future of Bethesda and what they're planning post Starfield.
But the other thing you said, yes, Elder Scrolls 6 is in pre-production, and we're going to be doing Fallout 5 after that. So our slate's pretty full going forward for a while. We have some other projects that we look at from time to time as well, but they do take a while. I wish they came out faster, really do. We're trying as hard as we can, but we want them to just be as best as they could be for everybody.
I believe altogether, Bethesda Game Studios, across all of their studios, is about 400 developers strong. I may be wrong about that total. And we know that all of those developers in some capacity are going to be working on the Elder Scrolls 6. Still, that game is probably not coming out until 2026. Maybe, and then we have Fallout 5, which is probably around 2030. This assumes that Bethesda doesn't drastically grow, and I don't know if they will, because Microsoft isn't exactly getting involved and they haven't really shown a need to grow that substantially over time. We'll have to see. Obviously, things can change in the future, but Elder Scrolls 6 currently in pre-production. I would not expect it for another 4 years at least, and then Fallout 5 maybe 2030. But we do know for sure that Bethesda Game Studios is in fact working on a Fallout 5. I know some people thought maybe another developer could come in, maybe Microsoft could come in and change that, but I never assumed that that was going to be the case. Now, I do think it is important to mention that Starfield 2 was kind of brought up here. The interviewer Ryan McCaffrey brings up that there probably won't be another Starfield sequel for about 10 to 15 years, and Howard's kind of he doesn't really have a response for that. He just says essentially, we're going to go as fast as we can, but we're trying to make the best gameplay experience, and that's kind of a given. So look, this is a problem that Bethesda Game Studios is running into. They have 3 main franchises. They are not a massively huge developer. For comparison's sake, Bethesda may have 400 developers. I think Ubisoft has like 12,000. So that is just shows you the scale and how Ubisoft can get a game out every year or two, while Bethesda takes about 3 to 5 years. So again, maybe that changes in the future, maybe it doesn't. It's really too early to say. Now, a couple of other things that Howard does bring up within this interview is the fact there is going to be that classic Bethesda step out moment. You know it from Fallout 4, Fallout 3, as soon as you enter into the open world and you're free to go venture about. There is going to be a moment like that. He also makes mention that there is not going to be a seamless moment where you can just fly into a planet as you have in No Man's Sky. He says that's really just not that important, and I'm fairly certain we did get a look at the animation or cinematic for that. You see the spaceship on a planet, and then it jumps up out into outer space, and it has a montage of different planets the spaceship leaving. So that is probably going to be the animation that is used for every single planet that we venture into and then leave for space or going somewhere else. This was a very interesting interview from Todd Howard. I don't think it really ceases any of the concerns that people have with Starfield, especially the procedural generation. It just puts a greater emphasis on the fact that the 1,000 planets really is just extra content, and there's probably only going to be like 5 to 10 planets that we're actually visiting for the main storyline and a lot of the side quests and content. So that is kind of the expectation that I personally had. I know others really thought that Bethesda went out of their ways to detail all of these worlds, and that doesn't appear to be the case. It does seem to be a reliance on procedural generation, and we'll see how that turns out and what other type of content randomly generates on these planets and how interesting it actually can be. I know the modding community, as I said in the last video, are really going to love this, but for standard casual players who are probably just going to be playing day one on console and playing it for the weeks after the release, we'll have to see. Anyway, as I said, a very interesting interview from Todd Howard on the future of Bethesda Game Studios and Starfield. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video or found any informative value, and make sure to follow my other social media accounts for updates on new videos. Links are always down in the description below. I'm most active on Twitter, giving opinions on news that I do not always get into video form, so do make sure to follow me over there. Also check out my Discord for all sorts of discussion on games. And again, thank you for joining. Consider subscribing for more videos like this. I'll see you later.